Welcome to that Deacon on YouTube. If you saw me walking down the street, or we had a conversation at a local coffee shop or a coffee house, or you walked on the campus of the church where I serve, or you're listening to me now, you wouldn't have any idea in your mind that, at least on my father's side, I am a first-generation American. My father's family came here in the early 1920s after the devastation from World War I. In the town and the city where my father lived, countries were now flexing their muscles, and nationalism was high on the agenda. At that time, anyone who once belonged or was a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and especially Austrian Germans, were seen by the Serbs as people that needed to be ethnically cleansed. So at that point in time, Serbs were coming into the city and killing anyone who spoke German. My grandfather at the time decided this was the moment to bring his family to safety, seeking basically sanctuary in the United States. Being afraid of what might be said to them or how they would be treated when they entered Ellis Island, they wrote down on the form that their country of origin was Yugoslavia, because they were afraid they might receive some bad treatment. On my mother's side, my grandmother came here as a 16-year-old, again after the destruction from World War I. She and her sister, a little bit older, came to this country, left their family, and tried to find a new life, basically seeking sanctuary after the end of World War I. Another interesting fact is that my grandmother on my mother's side spent her entire life as a housekeeper. She could read because her son brought home comic books, and she would go through the Sunday paper looking at the comic strips, which eventually taught her how to read. Until the day she died, all she could do was sign her name. She could never write in English. My other great-grandfather spent his entire life as a gardener, working for wealthy families in the Cleveland area. So I come from this immigrant stock background, which makes me feel that I have a right today to talk about our sanctuary program in the Diocese of Los Angeles and speak a little bit about what it is to promote and to embrace sacred resistance. The information I'm going to give you today is taken from a website which I will display right at the bottom of the screen. I will also put it in the information box down below. But last December, when the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles met for its convention, it voted to become a sanctuary diocese. There are probably a number of Episcopal dioceses across the country that have voted to embrace this movement. People who are systematically targeted is a form of evil. We understand that to call to stand in resistance to these systemic evils that oppress and marginalize any member of the human family, which is not limited to racism, sexism, nativism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and Islamic phobia. Basically, sacred resistance embraces the principle that every life is filled with human dignity, and we are asked to respect that dignity in every human being. One question that is asked is, what are the legal implications of being a sanctuary diocese? Well, being in the United States without proper documents is a civil offense. It's not a criminal one. It's simply not a crime to be undocumented, and describing any immigrant as illegal is legally inaccurate. That is propaganda that is put upon you by other people. Don't buy into it. So what are the greater implications of the Diocese of Los Angeles becoming a sanctuary diocese? Well, it urges congregations and institutions to discern how they are called to serve as places of welcome, refuge, healing, offering forms of material and pastoral support for those targeted, to ensure the dignity of human rights of all people, and by sacred resistance, if necessary. For some, it might mean joining an organization. For other people, it might mean standing up and marching. For others, it might mean actually taking people into their homes. Or, if need be, it might be a church saying they will house people and declare their church a sanctuary to see what legal ramifications might happen in that instance. But the big thing is to offer support in any way you can. Don't judge a person merely by how they look. Because like I said earlier, looking at me, you would never guess that I'm a first-generation American. I would suggest also listening to stories. I think my story I told was somewhat interesting about how my family came to this country. What about the person you meet or are having a conversation with? Have them share their story, because when a person shares their story, they become as human as you are. And you may find out that you have more in common than you thought. If anything, the sacred resistant movement is a chance for humanity to embrace itself. And that, no matter what plays out, is a good thing for all of us, for ourselves individually, for our families, for our churches, for our children, for our friends. The Sacred Resistance website has been very helpful to me because they have a lot of information. I will be able to print out some of this information and take it with me each month as we hold our laundry love. And so that will be very, very helpful. I was also thinking that a big thing in my ministry is what I call missional liturgies. And if you remember, for many years, I held the National Coming Out Day service. But basically, the structure of the service was people sharing their stories and the church listening to it and then embracing that person as a human being. I'm thinking of taking that same format that we have used over those years and turning that service into one all about celebrating immigrants that have come to this country. I would urge you to look at this website to gain information that will help you discern what you might do as a human being to help those who are marginalized, to embrace those that are struggling with entities that continue to hold power over others, where in fact the kingdom of God is a kingdom of open arms. So I urge you to think on this. If you're inclined to pray, pray on it. If you're inclined to meditate, meditate on how sacred resistance can work into your life and ways to make this country and your community a welcoming place for all.